You're listening to Out of the Box, a place for marketers to get inspired, get going, and break out of the box.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Jess Overton, and you're listening to Out of the Box, the marketing podcast exploring out-of-the-box approaches to marketing and growth. Today, I'm joined by Peter Fodor, founder and CEO at AppAgent. AppAgent is an award-winning strategic and creative marketing partner for top mobile brands and game publishers. Peter, welcome.
Hi, Jess. Thanks for having me.
A pleasure. So we're going to talk today about the importance of storytelling. But before we do that, I'd like to hear a little bit about your story. So tell me where you started in app marketing and what got you into it in the first place.
Sure. I think I can declare myself an industry veteran because it's already 11 years since I started in mobile. And marketing communications graduate who spent first about 7 years in a classic advertising business. But then I got fed up, with the classic campaigns and conservative approach by our clients. So me and my co-founder started a games studio in 2011. We reached about 80 million downloads with 12 apps and games. We got numerous featurings by Apple, Google, Amazon, etc. And thanks to my blog that I started writing back in 2011 as sort of like journaling of my journey and the development in mobile marketing, a couple of fellow developers approached me around 2015 with the request to help them with their apps and games, to bring them to the market and scale them, and that's how basically AppAgent started.
Very cool. So you're translating your experience from a developer or from an actual development house into the space to help other developers. Can you tell me then a little bit more about AppAgent? How do you guys approach user acquisition?
Sure. So our approach is very strategically oriented, I would say, and heavily focused on ad creatives because there we see the biggest lever in UA today. We have two main offerings: ad and store creatives for top publishers such as Supercell, Square Enix, Social Point, etc. And then the marketing offering is called UA and Growth Program, and that's an offering for scale-ups with verified product market fit who look for growth opportunities. So we help them in 3-month cycles to analyze their historical data, which is essential to understand the starting position and the potential. Then we have sort of scorecard with priorities. Then we execute, and after 3 months, we run a growth review, which is summary of the learnings and an outline for the next 3-month cycle. So this is what we see is working very nicely because it's holistic. It takes into consideration things such as marketing analytics, the brand and communication, user acquisition, conversion rate optimization in the store. So it's really helping companies to resolve their growth needs very holistically.
Very cool. Well, I do want to get more into actual the bits and bytes of how you guys do the work, because that's really what I enjoy talking about, really getting into the how-tos and the best practices. Mm-hmm. But I do want to start a little bit even before that, before we get really into the nitty-gritty, in the sort of the higher level storytelling. That with 5 million apps roughly in the App Store in 2021, standing out from the crowd, I think is almost everybody in the industry would agree that is our major challenge in terms of user acquisition, getting noticed. And you predicted that more sophisticated storytelling will take the mobile space like a storm in 2022. Talk to me about that. What do you mean by that?
I believe it's a natural evolution, and it comes with the need to stand out from the crowd. Because if you imagine App Store like Walmart, for example, it's a huge marketplace where consumer easily gets lost. There are so many choices. And strong brands and storytelling actually helps people to navigate and find the right product, be it an app or a game, And Chris Anderson, the guy behind the TED conference, explains in the opening chapter of his book how stories are important for human race. It's how we learn, how we understand our world. And stories are also very easy to remember. And I believe that, 10, 12 years since the App Store opened, with this tremendous competition, this is the way how to differentiate yourself and help the customer to find you and to give the consumer strong reason to invest their time and eventually their money into something that you are offering. And I believe there are these like three distinct stages of communication. When you are starting, let's say you are launching a new app or game, you can start with very basic type of ads, rational ads, let's call them. For example, this way, it's like gameplay. It's showing the product in action. So just like demonstrating what you're offering, sort of demo. That will serve its purpose for some time. But then you will see this is not working anymore. The early adopters segment is exploited, and you have to add something on top of that. So you start with a bit of emotions, be it some catchy openers, 3D elements, stuff like that, to enhance the impression. But again, at some point, this is not enough. And then you are moving to the last stage where you have to incorporate some sort of like storytelling, where when you have to really bring something that's giving the true reason and create some emotional and deep connection with the consumer. And that's probably the closest to classic TV commercials that are 28 seconds out of 30 telling you a story, and only in the last pack shot the product is revealed. So that's the structure of classic TV ad. But I believe that the mobile advertising space is actually getting closer to this because we have to bring something new to the consumer to give them reason to pay attention to our product and service.
So do you think then that sort of narrative storytelling as a mobile user acquisition strategy is going to be a hot topic this year because of the evolution of the App Store and the fact that we've now gotten to a very mature point in the App Store? Or is it more that it's also, or maybe it's both combined, that a specific app in its evolution needs to use storytelling at a specific time? Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, it makes sense, and I think it's both. It's the market and it's also the product life cycle. And of course, there are products that jump straight to stage three. You are based in Tel Aviv, right? So Raid Shadow Legends is actually a game from Israel. They started immediately, or generally it looks they started immediately with stories, these sketches, and 3D characters from the game interacting with players in their ads. So you can see big publishers already have noticed that this is the way to go. This is the way to build a brand and really be different. And at the same time, even if you are starting with smaller budget than Raid Shadow Legends, you will eventually end up in the same spot.
Got it. So it can even act as sort of a hack, if you will, to sort of advance your marketing strategy a couple of stages or jump forward, leapfrog those initial stages of getting the early adopters and go straight into a narrative-based marketing strategy.
Yeah, I believe so. And especially if you have experience in certain genre, you are confident that the game you are bringing to the market is really high potential, then I believe it's worth taking this risk and just directly go for this like bolder approach. If you are a small developer who needs to verify the market fit, further develop the game, and actually come to the point when this is a reasonable investment, then of course you have to go step by step.
Sure. I think that Raid Legends. I don't classify myself as a gamer by any stretch of the word. I think actually my wife does more gaming than I do, which is probably a slight anomaly in most households. But Raid
No,
Legends.
not really.
No, is it the same in
You would
your
be
house?
surprised. Not really. It's not like my case, but I recently saw a statistic that 57% of mobile gamers are female, which was shocking to me. I would say it's 60-40 in favor of men, but actually, your wife is not an exception.
There you go. So I would have said about the same as you, 60-40 in favor of men.
Not
But
anymore.
it's good to know that the statistic is actually roughly switched. And when I look at Raid Legends, I can see the narrative, right? I mean, I've seen a couple of their commercials. They had one with I can't remember his name, from Jurassic Park, but
Mhm.
they've done a really good job of that. And I could probably pick out a couple of ideas that indicate what a strong narrative looks like. But I'm curious to get your take on that. How do you think an app developer today can build a stronger narrative to help themselves stand out?
You know what? I strongly believe that this starts even before writing the first line of code. Because of the massive competition you've mentioned on the beginning of our chat, you, as a developer, game designer, or product manager, should define why your product exists, how it's different, why should people care and invest their time, and also to understand your audience or the future audience and their motivators, because then marketers can take this product vision and audience insights and create a compelling unique selling proposition. And that's, for me, the core of everything that follows. Then you are developing the brand around it. Once you have the brand, you are developing more elaborative narrative, because the narrative is pretty much like what I'm saying, and the brand is who I am. So it's very connected together, and it needs to be in line, so it's consistent and easy to understand for the consumer. So this all should start very early on by analyzing the market trends, the competition, and defining what do you want to bring to the party, what's the key reason why you should exist, and then you are developing these layers on top of that until the point when you get to the narrative thing.
So I've come from a marketing background. I've worked in a bunch of different industries, but you luckily come from a developer background, in as much as you sort of worked in that field. I don't know if you wrote code or how involved you were really on the technical side, but do you think that's something that comes naturally to somebody who's sort of starting into that world? Because doing those branding exercises and those marketing exercises so early, I guess it feels to me like it would depend a lot on who your founder team is, wouldn't it?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, it's very much, as you have said, it's connected to the personality of the founder. Uh, we are working with founders that are technically oriented, and that's probably the type of the founder first from things we are discussing today. Then people who are former product managers, and they already understand this positioning thing and this kind of stuff, and they have it in mind, even though they are not marketers, because they understand the product has to bring something unique. And then, of course, people who are more business oriented, and in their case, this is usually how they start. I actually believe that if you are skipping this stage, then it could become very difficult later on. You even might realize that you are sort of like me too product. And no matter how amazing marketing team you have, it will be very difficult to persuade consumers to pay attention to your product. And it's not like that you build something and then marketers come and they make a magic. It's not like that. It needs to be baked in the product itself. So that's why I'm very often starting conversation with our potential clients about these basics, why you started, what's your vision, where this whole thing is heading in the future. And I try to get back to the roots, and if it's not in place already, then to build the understanding of what we call brand and eventually narrative together with the developer, so the creative team afterwards can jump on something tangible and they can come up with ideas that are matching the whole idea and vision of the developer.
So I want to jump to that part then, because you talked there about connecting the creative with the brand and the narrative that you've built with the developer. And
Mhm.
I know that you also, I think you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation about the sort of the connection or the fluidity between user acquisition and app store optimization. Can you make
Yes.
that connection for me? How do you connect those three dots? Creative, brand narrative, and UA ASO.
Yeah, sure. So the brand is actually the core. Like even if you are not actively developing a brand, you have some, and it's created by how the product looks like, how it feels, what you are posting on social media, but even what your founder is uh, saying on a TV show, for example. All of these pieces
Mhm.
actually create some impression, and this impression is basically a brand. So this is important to accept because you either develop a brand by coincidence or you're actively nurturing your image and how you want to be perceived. So that's one step. The second is that based on this foundation, all the pieces of communication, be it a post on Instagram or your store listing or the splash screen in the app or the ad on Facebook, should speak the same language. And that's because from the consumer standpoint, they will see a couple of these things on their journey, something here, something there, maybe two, three touch points in case of some, let's say, services, let's say some travel service, maybe they will see it 10 times before they make a purchase decision, but they are building sort of like mental image of who you are, what you can bring to their life, how you can be beneficial to them. And therefore, this consistency is vital. If there's some discrepancy, imagine that I see, let's say, Headspace on Instagram, some ad that appears in my feed. Then the other day, I somehow end up on their Instagram page and I see some post they've released recently. And then when it's November, dark outside, I feel depressed. It somehow clicks, and I'm searching for something that might help resolve my sort of anxiety. And then I end up searching for meditation, stuff like that. So I see something in search results, I maybe end up on their web page. And then only I go to the store and decide to install the app and become their customer eventually. This needs to be really consistent because with discrepancies, I'm confused as a consumer. I won't understand what this particular product will bring to my life, and I will probably leave and maybe install Calm instead. So the brand plays the role of sort of like glue that connects all the things. So from the consumer standpoint, it's always the same message. Think of Coca-Cola. It's the logo, it's the shape of the bottle, it's the color red, and at the same time, it's refreshment and friendliness, probably. These are the keywords that you feel when you see a bottle of Coke or an ad of Coke. And it's always the same for decades. It speaks the same language and tells you the same message. And there's a reason for that.
So if we get into then best practices, I want to take that Coke example. When you're talking about color, you're talking about font, you're talking about the bottle shape. So really, when you're talking about that creative language, you're talking about everything, right? That's the actual language that they're using, right? The words, the phrasings that they might use. It's also I guess the color schemes, the fonts that they're
Mhm.
using. Do you have some specific best practices on what those building blocks are of consistency and narrative?
Mhm. Sure. So, because we're in mobile, it's a fast-paced industry, then we are keeping a simple approach, and there's a couple of things that we want to have in place before we move to ideation stage. So we always want to have clarity with our partners on unique selling proposition. So this one sentence, why should people care? Then 3 to 5 key messages. So sort of like support to this USP, the like how you defend this USP or why it's like meaningful.
Hmm.
Then we want to understand what are the motivators of the audience because that brings us to the tonality, which keywords we have to highlight, and generally like how to lead the conversation with the consumer. And then on the practical side of things, it's brand manual, which typically consists of logo, color scheme, fonts, some basic design rules. And the more the brand is sophisticated, the more complex these rules are. I'll give you an example. We've recently worked for a game that's using Warhammer IP, and they've sent us over 7 decks, each 50 slides long, and we have to study everything in detail, including stuff like how the reflections on an armor of some warrior should look like this
Wow.
level of detail. So that's the super sophisticated IP and brand that we have to keep in mind when working on their ads. If you are a startup, you probably have only a few of these things, but we try to really help to fill those gaps if this newly founded startup hasn't everything in place. When we got in touch, then we try to make it clear and therefore align on these fundamentals that will be then reflected in each and every ad or screenshot or whatever else we'll produce together.
I want to jump on something that you said there. I think that there's a lot there that people can take home and make sure that they're working on. And one of the things that you said there was understanding the user motivation. Talk to me a
Mhm.
little bit more about how publishers can leverage analysis of user motivation and where they can do that, how they can best do it, and how they can apply it to optimize their brand strategy.
I believe this is one of the best ways to make your messaging, your ads relevant, that you understand what drives people. And we are using this predominantly for games because there the motivators are a bit more like hidden. If you, for example, have a fitness app, then you can easily define just by
Sure.
reading reviews in the store what drives people. It's not a rocket science. For games, it's more complicated. And we, for example, like Game Refinery's motivators or Quantic Foundry that helps marketers, but also product designers to understand for which segment the game is the most appealing. And these motivations are various. For example, just to set the stage for our listeners, it could be the need of social interactions or domination or outsmarting the others. And if you understand what the motivation is on the consumer side, early on you can even build the game around it. You can really keep it in mind while developing the core game loop and meta, etc. Later on, this serves greatly when developing ads, because if you have this specific motivator in mind that basically defines the concept, how to visualize that in Clash of Clans you are dominating by partnering with other players, like this, like team domination. That's what makes people the most excited. Or when you are into some strategy games, it could be creation, building, like this feeling of developing something new from nothing. And then all your concepts should be somehow connected to this core motivation, and then it will really click nicely with the audience. So that's how I believe you should approach concepting today, because it increases chances that you will really make people excited about what you are telling them.
That's fascinating. It really goes to the heart of the connection of between psychology and marketing, which obviously are they always go hand in hand. But I don't know that I've heard it so clearly described as linking the user motivation in a game to the entirety of the creative. I asked
We
you about.
actually just one thing to this.
Sure.
We actually like use this for both ads and store assets. And very often we have, like, I will call it branches, because for Clash of Clans there's a motivation, this domination, for example, but also at the same time the need of feeling of being some part of a community or a team. So you can actually have like different branches that you are exploring, and by that you are actually broadening your target audience, because there might be players who are really into being in a group of other players who are like-minded and who want to collaborate together. And at the same time, you can attract another segment of users that's really this like macho type of player who wants to be the very best, no matter how much it will cost. You know, so this is also the way how to get the game to more players because you will play on more nodes, so to say.
And then really not only to new segments perhaps, but also to increase your user acquisition reach because you're able to personalize based on those user motivations. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. And I believe there's even a framework by Facebook on that. It's Blue something. I can even share the link that you can then put in the
Yeah, we'll
notes
put it in the
of the
show notes.
show.
Sure.
But it's actually a strategy Facebook released, I don't know, a year ago as a recommendation to UA managers, and it's heavily connected to motivators.
Very interesting. I asked you previously about best practices for something, so I want to flip that question on its head. And when we're talking about user motivations and how to leverage that, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you have seen in the past about, connecting motivations to narrative and creatives?
So first and foremost, not using motivators at all. Just saying your users or players or customers as numbers in your analytics or some sort of spreadsheet. So I think it all starts with digging deep into your audience, asking good questions, and even being ready to meet them face to face or jumping on a video call and asking them all these whys to understand what's the true reason, and then using it for the product development as well as marketing. Then I would say this inconsistency, because that can create a lot of mess and it will cost you a lot of money if you are speaking, let's say, different language and sending different messages. You would lose this synergy that otherwise will play in your favor. And then this example of Coca-Cola, clarity. Coca-Cola is all about refreshment and friendship. And I think, this simplicity and clarity over time is what many teams miss because they have this FOMO, that they see this trend, this fake ad and that approach and, this high performing ad, and they just go and copy. But at the end of the day, using this strategy, they will become Me Too product. And who cares about Me Too products?
Fascinating. I think that what if we just cut that last minute, there's so much value in there for marketers today to take home and really apply to their strategies. Peter, I'm sold on narrative marketing. I think you've made a great case for why narrative is going to be very, very important this year and certainly into the future. I want to close our conversation by asking the same question I ask of all our guests, and that is, what's the most out of the box marketing you've seen or been a part of?
Great question. Maybe this one. We are running internal sessions called Creative Sparks, and that's where the creative team summarizes the best performing and most creative ads for the past month. And we always have this section that's going beyond mobile marketing. And last Friday, Anya spoke about Oatly. Do you know this brand? Have you heard about them?
Yep.
Yeah. So Oatly, for those who aren't aware of what's the product, what's the brand about, it's oat milk, and this is actually one of the most inspiring brands in general. How they communicate, which like brand they have built over time. It's so inspirational. It's like funny, quirky, very bold and situational, and I would recommend our listeners to Google Oatly Slush because 2 years ago, I guess it was 2 years ago, I listened to their chief creative officer, John Schoolcraft, on how to crack consumer marketing without a marketing team. And there are such great examples of how to do big moves with little budget and win consumers' hearts that you'll be inspired for the rest of your lifetime.
Amazing. Well, I'll definitely be checking that out shortly. Peter, thank you very much for your time, for coming on the show. It's been an insightful conversation.
Thanks for having me and have a wonderful day.
You too.